Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John
Thanks for
Hook.
joining us on Fox 10 Newsmaker Sunday. It is going to be a very closely watched race. April 24th, a special election to fill the seat of Trent Franks, who you know, longtime Republican representative in District 8, which, by the way, is the West Valley. And Hiral Tiperneni is our guest this week on Newsmaker Sunday. We had Debbie Lesko on a few weeks ago. Hiral Tiperneni is the Democratic nominee, the Democratic representative running for that district, trying to win that seat. Great to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad we could do it. We've been working on this for a while.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the
Good
race.
to see you.
Nice to see
Let
you.
me start with tape number one. This was a poll that was done recently showing you and Debbie Lesko very close in this race. Is that how you see it? Is that how you read it?
I do see it that way. And honestly, John, this sort of reiterated and confirmed for us what we've been feeling on the ground for some time. We have been sensing tremendous enthusiasm, not just from our base, but from independents and Republicans as well. You know, in our campaign field office, I mean, not a day goes by that folks don't come in and say, you know, I'm a Republican, but we're supporting your campaign, we're voting for you.
34% registered independent in that district. So that's where you've got to pick it off, because
Right.
Republicans make up 41%, Democrats take up 24%. We've seen you on the ads, but I want to get to know you over this next 30 minutes and let folks get to know you. Tell me about Hiral Tiperneni.
Well, look, I am a wife, a proud mom of 3 young adults. I am a physician. My background is emergency medicine. I practiced for 10 years. I now work in cancer research advocacy. I am a 21-year resident of the West Valley. And, you know, I grew up in the Midwest, grew up in Ohio, outside of Cleveland, a small working-class town called Brook Park, Ohio. And I am just incredibly proud to be the Democratic candidate running in this race, because it is a district that has been in need of a voice representing the families of CD8 for a long time, and I am thrilled to have an opportunity to be that voice.
I read you immigrated to America from India with your family at age 3?
Correct.
So the immigrant story, you know this, you've lived it. Where do you think we are on this issue right now?
You know, it's a tough one, because you're right. I mean, I'm a first-generation immigrant, and look, my family came here seeking that better life, greater opportunity, wanting their children to pursue their American dreams, which I have had an incredible opportunity to do through a lot of hard work, sacrifice, and commitment. I've been able to achieve a lot of my dreams, and it is really an honor to be in this space just running for office.
Do you have any theories as to why Indian immigrants have done so well in America? I've got several friends who've just knocked it out of the park.
I mean, look, I don't think the values are much different than the values that I feel, you know, families all around the country teach their kids. It's about working hard. It's about education. It's about...
a lot about education.
It is. But again, that's because a lot of folks have come to other countries, I mean, namely America, but even other places in the world, seeking a great education. Because in India, and this is, I'm talking about when I was a child, maybe not so much now, but it wasn't guaranteed that, you know, if you worked hard, you'd necessarily get to where you should go. There were obstacles in the way. And that's a lot of that American dream that I want to work hard to make sure that other people are able to really realize for themselves if they're willing to work hard.
Let's talk about some issues, and one of them in the news, of course, this week. This would be tape number 2, the Red for Ed movement. You've been out there pretty strongly supporting the teachers in this effort. Where do you think we're going with this? Has the governor handled it well, mishandled it? Should he be given a chance to try to, quote unquote, do the right thing to solve it?
So, well, I am a strong supporter of teachers and of public schools, and I've made that clear from day one when I launched my campaign last July. Obviously, this Red for Ed movement has gotten very strong recently, and I stand by our public school teachers. They do an incredible job shaping the future of our children and our communities. You know, I know that there's been this recent effort by our governor to propose salary raises. It doesn't sound like it's a sustainable plan. It doesn't sound like it really includes ancillary staff, which I think is also important. So I think it's an important issue that still needs to be hammered out. I don't think you can throw this sort of quick and dirty solution at it and think it's going to fly. It needs to be a very thoughtful plan if you're really looking to resolve this and not have to readdress this, you know, every 6 months or every year.
Do you believe they will reach a deal before next Thursday? Is there enough time on the clock to even do that?
I mean, what, it's Friday afternoon right now?
Yes, right.
And they're talking about Thursday.
Yes.
So I think it really is up to those two parties, but I don't know. It's not looking great. I mean, obviously, look, the teachers don't want to strike. They want to work. They don't want to leave their kids. They want to work. They want to teach their students. This is not something they're doing because it's easy or fun. It's hard, but they're doing it because it's important. Mm-hmm. They deserve higher salaries. A lot of them work 2 or 3 jobs. And
I bring this up, it's really not a federal issue, but in a sense it is, because dollars do flow from the feds, I think to the tune of $500 billion to states to then spend that money. So it is an issue you could grapple with in Congress.
Right.
Do you think federal money should flow that way, or should it really be a state deal?
Look, like one of the biggest things is Title I funding that comes from the federal level. That's very important. We have to make sure those schools in the struggling communities have proper funding.
That's 1965. We've been doing that since 1965.
Right. And we have a lot of communities where the kids struggle. And if we don't ensure those resources, John, what do we have? We have a widening education gap where kids in certain zip codes continue to rise and other kids really struggle.
Do you think charter schools, on balance, Arizona's been the great laboratory for charter schools. We were really the cutting edge of that under Governor Fife Symington. Do you believe on balance that's been good for education, or do you think it's really hurt public schools? And they're all public schools, but district schools would be the more appropriate term.
Right. So how I feel about charter schools is, look, I'm all for bringing in new, creative, innovative ways of teaching and formats. But I do believe if public funding is going to a school, then that school should meet the same levels of transparency and accountability that your regular public schools have to meet. They should have those same guidelines and oversight if they're receiving public funding.
Your kids went to public school?
They did. They did. They all went through the schools in the Deer Valley School District. I'm very proud to say they're great schools. But again, we know that we have such disparity between zip codes and school districts, and that shouldn't be the case.
Right.
All of our children deserve that great first start in life.
Let's talk about a couple of other issues out there right now. President Trump, I'm curious. Let's roll tape number 5. President Trump, how much does that come up when you're talking to folks in CD8? He won the district by 21 points. He did very well there. Is this an issue that's coming up or not?
You know, honestly, it's not something that we talk about a lot. People are talking about the issues on the ground, like things that really impact their day-to-day life. And some of that stuff is more background noise. And, you know, when I'm going to the doors or I'm talking to them on the phone, they're asking me, hey, what's your idea to help bring my premiums down? How do I make sure my kids get a good education? Will they be able to afford college? Will there be jobs waiting for them that pay good wages?
So this stuff is good drama, but it's not what's top of mind for most people.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because I think a lot of it sort of sucks the oxygen out of the room, you know, when you're supposed to be working on those critical issues, and instead there's a lot of time spent on background noise. I do wish, you know, the Congress and the Senate would be able to focus all their energies on really bringing us progress on these important issues, because families are struggling.
Debbie Lesko has talked a lot about furthering and being a soldier in trying to execute the Trump agenda. So when you've debated her, where do you kind of navigate that? Because if you've got people in the district who support a lot of what he's doing, how do you kind of weave that? How do you navigate it?
So again, I mean, I've been focused on the issues, and look, where one of the biggest issues, for example, is health care.
Right.
And, you know, I have taken a very moderate approach to health care reform. It's a plan I'm really proud of. And I honestly think that it's a plan that conservatives and progressives alike would jump on board with.
Tell me about it. Tell me about how it differs from what we came to know as Obamacare.
So the ACA took us to a certain place, right? This is a whole new level and a whole new stage. Look, the goal, there's sort of 2 pillars, right? One is about who gets covered, and the other thing is about how do we pay for it. As far as who gets covered, I do believe every American should have access to quality, affordable health care. We are the only industrialized nation that does not do that. So that's number one. Number two, how do we pay for it? Look, one of the biggest things I have proposed is a Medicare buy-in. It's a public option, and that allows people under 65 to purchase Medicare as their insurance plan, which we know is efficient and effective. It has very little overhead, and it if you have Medicare competing in the marketplace with your private insurance companies, not only does it enhance competition, so we all get greater choice, but it brings down costs.
You don't think it would drive private insurers out?
I think it would force them to streamline their costs and continue to build good products. And look, if their costs are competitive, I'm not saying they're going to come right down to Medicare, but if they're competitive and they're still offering a strong product, they'll still have business.
Does it, as an American, does it bother you that it seems we are careening toward a two-tier system? People with money who can afford really good care, and people who can't, who are going to get another level of care. A two-tiered system.
And I agree that I don't think that that's right. And so what this does is it actually gives everybody that same quality product, a very comparable quality product. And you know, one of the things about
Would there be anywhere we could look to where it's being done? Would Massachusetts be close?
Well, you know, because that was actually sort of the basis, right, for the ACA.
Right.
And I think having that strong public option is the one piece that we didn't get when the ACA came about. And frankly, look, what we want to do is also maintain those essential health care benefits, right, in every insurance plan. So no insurance plan is a junk plan. And if you can ensure that, then it's comparable across the board. We just have variations in pricing and reimbursement, things like that. But overall, everybody gets quality, affordable health care, and it's a buy-in. It's not a handout.
This, in the end, is a very personal matter, your health care. You lost your mother and a nephew to cancer. What effect did that have on you, not only personally, but in the public policy realm?
I mean, it had a huge impact. Look, you know, as a physician, to be on that other side of the hospital bed, you know, it was a big
Did you ask
shift.
too many questions?
Well, you know, you want to be your family member's advocate,
Yeah, exactly
and you
right.
understand the medical lingo, and you want them to not have to worry about that stuff, right? And but it's tough because as a physician, you know, if there's anybody you want to be able to use your skills to save, certainly you want your family members to be right there. And
Did it change your perception of care?
well, it reminded me just how important it was that people had access to those resources. Because fortunately, my mom did have good care, and my nephew had good care. But, you know, we also saw people in adjacent hospital beds that didn't have that kind of insurance, and maybe you know, when my nephew was sick, for example, there was a young man that was a couple doors down. His father lost his job because he was spending so much time taking care of his son. The mom was, you know, trying to shuffle between taking care of the other little children and taking care of her son. They were crushed between, you know, these bills, not having a job, paying their mortgage. I mean, you see families really struggle like that, and you realize how important it is to not have that worry that your insurance is going to cover it and you can focus on your loved one.
One thing we know in this race in District 8, you or Debbie Lesko will be the congressperson from District 8. Then there's another race that will happen in November for the permanent two-year term. I'm just curious how this is played out. Two women running against each other, because Congress is going to have more women than ever after this election. It'll be a record.
Well, look, I mean, right now, Congress, I believe the last numbers were about 18% are women in between the Congress and the Senate. Obviously, that doesn't reflect our demographics in our country. So I think it's kind of long overdue. I think there should be women in equal numbers in leadership positions. Representation is important. Having diversity and representation matters.
When I talked to her, she said she had met you at a, I think it's State of the City in Glendale, was it? And she was on this program, and she said, yeah, I met Hiral, and she seemed like a really nice person, and I look forward to debating her. Has it been pretty civilized?
Yeah, I think our debates have been very civilized. I mean, my focus has been on the issues. She seems like a very nice person. And
if there's one issue that you would want people, as we go to break, you would want people to say, okay, you want to know where we are? Hiral's here, Debbie's here. What would that issue be that would really delineate where you guys are?
Well, I would say retirement security. I've made it very clear that I will fight tooth and nail to prevent any cuts being made into Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid, which is also very important to our retiree population.
These are the three pillars of our social system, really.
Right, and my opponent has made it clear that she says, I won't change anything for people getting it today, but that does not cover people for tomorrow, next year, 5 years. And look, people have invested in these earned benefits for decades of hard work. And she and Speaker Ryan are proposing very deep cuts into these programs.
What if you were to, and this doesn't seem to be a horrible idea, and we've done it before, raise the retirement age for eligibility for Social Security. Simply by doing that, by a year or two, all of a sudden, magically, the balance sheet starts to come into balance.
Well, look, I know that that's been discussed before, but...
and do it with early workers. We're all working longer anyway.
Well, I think there are other things that can be done before that. I mean, I think they can raise, you know, when you're talking about like the payroll tax, I mean, you can do other things before you go to that. And I think we have to have conversations about making sure it stays solvent. But let's face it, these proposed cuts now are being sort of propagated through because they created this huge $1.5 trillion deficit with this monstrous corporate tax cut bill that they put through in December. So it's very disingenuous to suggest that these cuts are being made because they're worried about solvency. They're trying to pay off a deficit that they created through some fiscal irresponsibility.
$21 trillion and climbing.
Yeah, and at a time of economic growth. That's not when you want to raise the debt and create such a deficit.
We're going to take a break. Hiral Tiperneni is our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. She is the Democratic candidate for CD8 in the West Valley. I'm trying to break down exactly. We're talking basically north and west of Phoenix. Sun City's in there, and a reliably conservative district with perhaps a competitive race this time around. We're back with Hiral Tiperneni right after this on Newsmaker Sunday. Back on Newsmaker Sunday with Hiral Tiperneni. She is a Democratic candidate for CD8, Congressional District 8. This was Trent Frank's district before he got embroiled in a lot of controversy after, you know, inappropriate behavior with a couple of interns in his office and people who worked for him, talking about surrogacy and all kinds of stuff that got him into a situation where he had to resign. In fact, if I can, I'd like to put up some video of Trent Frank's, tape number 7. Do you even have a take on that whole situation that got him in so much trouble?
Well, look, I mean, my sympathies are with the women that were impacted by his inappropriate behavior. Women should not have to deal with issues of sexual harassment or assault anywhere. Workplace, home, school, in any social situation. And I actually think that's one of you know, with the Me Too movement, I think it's so important because women whose voices otherwise were suppressed are given a voice, are able to speak up without fear of repercussion or consequence, and they're able to share their truth and their stories. And people are being held accountable. And that should be the case whether it's in corporate America, in Hollywood, or in D.C.
Or in medicine.
Or in medicine.
Did you encounter this?
I never encountered any, you know, obvious inappropriate behavior, no. I didn't.
That's remarkable.
What I will say is, though, you know, when I went through medical school and residency, I mean, certainly the numbers now are much more even, men and women. But back then, you know, there are moments where, you know, you're maybe the only woman on rounds, you're the only woman in the OR, you're the only woman, you know, on a shift. And it's not about the sexual harassment or anything like that, but, you know, there is a sense of having to prove yourself and sort of stand up to the men and make sure that you claim your space there. Would
you take that to Congress?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let me ask you about the claims in some of the ads. You've tied Debbie Lesko to this federal investigation into illegal money laundering in her campaign. And AZ Central kind of took you to task on that. They said that you made several unfair or false claims in the campaign ad. Is there anything in that you'd like to take back?
Well, look, what I said and what we reflected in our commentary is that it's unethical at best and illegal at worst. And we said leave it up to the investigators. What she really did was a disservice not just to the rule of law, possibly, but to her donors.
She says it's totally legal. Do you believe it is?
Well, what the facts say is that it's legal for the state, by the state guidelines, but maybe not so much by the federal guidelines. So I say let the investigation be completed.
Do you think that's gotten too much attention in the race?
I don't think so. I mean, look, if we're going to be lawmakers, we should certainly be expected to follow the law.
Okay. There we go. Let's roll tape number 3. I'm curious about your take on this as a immigrant yourself, first-generation American. What do you do with dreamers who, we just recently had a Supreme Court decision here in Arizona that said, you know what, the state universities cannot improvise and community colleges can't improvise on this.
Right.
They are not entitled to in-state tuition. What did you make of that decision? That was a unanimous decision, both in the appellate court and at the Supreme Court.
I mean, I think that's unfortunate. And what I think is, look, these dreamers are young people, came here by no choice of their own. They have grown up here in our communities. This is the only place they've ever called home. And they are students, they are working jobs, some of them are in the military. And they've had no criminal records. These are law-abiding young people who just want to go forward with their lives. And they are contributing. We're talking about EMTs and nurses and teachers and
Do you relate
carpenters.
to them on a level that maybe many of us cannot because you lived it?
Well, I think what I relate to is knowing that you embrace the country as being your own and working hard, playing by the rules, and hoping that the country then also appreciates your contributions back.
Do you believe once we get past an election, this issue will be solved? I mean, even President Trump has really expressed a willingness to try to do something about this.
And I think that's a great point, and that's what I would say with the DACA kids, with for the DREAM Act, is look, he said he wants to deal with it with compassion. My opponent has actually said she wants to deal with it with compassion. So let's deal with it with compassion. Let's give them that DREAM Act so they can move forward with their lives, and let's not use them as leverage.
Do you suspect both sides have done just that? It's become a wedge issue for Democrats and Republicans.
I mean, they should not be leveraging these young people's futures. We have to consider their futures with that compassion that both parties have expressed.
We're back with Dr. Hiral Tiperneni, Democrat for District 8, congressional race. The election, special election to replace Trent Franks, who retired earlier this year, is April 24th, and then there's another election in November for the same seat. That would be for the full 2-year term. Back with Dr. Tiperneni in a moment on Newsmaker Sunday. Final moments with Dr. Hiral Tiperneni, who is a Democratic candidate for Congress out of CD 8 in the West Valley. A couple of points we hadn't gotten to. Second Amendment position.
I support the Second Amendment. I support the right of law-abiding Americans to purchase firearms through legal channels, whether it's to protect their homes, their families, for hunting and sport.
Any restrictions?
What I also believe, John, is that we have to approach gun violence as a public health issue. It is a public health crisis. There are people dying every day from random gun violence, and that has to be addressed. We have to be keeping our citizenry safe. And one of the things that we know, the vast majority of Americans agree on, are comprehensive background checks. And that's across the spectrum. That's not a partisan issue. It shouldn't be hard. And right now, we have a speaker that's not willing to even bring it to the floor, but that is something the vast majority of Americans agree on. So there are common sense steps we can take, and those common sense steps, don't impinge on any law-abiding Americans' Second Amendment rights.
You brought up speaker. Let me roll tape number 8. I'm just curious. You had Lamb in that race. Where the heck was it? Oh, it was Connor Lamb, Pennsylvania. That was a Trump district, 20-plus points. Nancy Pelosi, should she be Speaker if the Democrats were to take the majority in November?
Well, look, I would say it's unclear what the House is going to look like after November. I mean, there are a lot of, I imagine there'll be a lot of new faces. And that being said, whoever does throw their hat in the ring, I'll have, sort of a general litmus test. My main concern is to make sure that whoever is Speaker has the best interests of my district at heart. And one of the major issues is Social Security and Medicare. So, somebody who I know supports that, that would be somebody I would consider supporting.
Good to have you on the program. I'm glad we worked it out. Best of luck on the 24th.
Thank you.
And,
I appreciate that very much.
Depending on what happens, we're going to have you back because you've got a race in November again.
We do. Thank you so much.
We'll see you. Thank you.